One. I think we're on. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the drill down. Hopefully we're all happening okay there. I'll just give you a little bit more volume there so we can... am I happy with that? Yeah, a little bit better. And we want to probably drop that one down a bit so that it doesn't blast you in a minute. Okay. Welcome everyone to the drill down. My name's Nathan, and this is where we think about the passage that we looked at last Sunday and have a bit of a drill down into it. Now, the drill down is a funny sort of medium, isn't it? Because normally when we have a small group or a Bible study, we're all sitting in the same room and we're talking together. Well, we can still talk together this way. It's just a little different. There's two ways that you can talk. You can speak into the live chat there. And the second way to do it is after we're finished, come back to the to the link, and there'll be some room for comments underneath. You can put a comment in there and go with that. In fact, I think Brianna and Elijah might have put a comment in last time, and I haven't replied to that yet, but I will have a look at that a little bit later on. We're looking at 2 Corinthians, and I was talking to someone this week who said that they had just had a friend who did a thesis on 2 Corinthians, and they reckon that 2 Corinthians is the most difficult book in the New Testament. Now, you know, we've just done Revelation. That was pretty difficult. But I want to say 2 Corinthians is pretty tough. And I think it's because it's so personal and powerful. Why is my... I need to put that on silent. There we go. That was Simon Abramovich texting me at right on 7:30. Anyway, let's get into it. Right, well, jumped on there pretty quick, didn't I? I forgot to push that too quickly. Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 16 is where we're at. And so we're going to jump on that there and jump there, and let's dive into it. Now, remember that 2 Corinthians chapters 10 through to chapter 13 are one section within Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and that the shift from chapter 9 to chapter 10, the shift in tone, is so significant and obvious that many people have thought that this is another letter from Paul, one of the 4 Corinthian letters that he wrote. We have 2. Some people say that number 2 is actually 2 and 3, something like that. 3 and 4, whatever, or 4 and 5. What I have found, and my thought though, for whatever that's worth, is that 2 Corinthians is one full letter, and probably what happened between 9 and 10 is that as Paul was writing, he had a visit from Titus, and Titus updated him on some stuff, and that has hence changed the tone of the letter in chapter 10. And he finishes off the letter there. He may have been planning to finish off the letter with the collection, and finished there at end of chapter 9, but he doesn't, and he goes on. The things that he speaks about later in our section, chapters 10 to 13, although a different tone, do pick up on themes earlier on. So there is a consistency and a unity in some of the ideas. And so it really doesn't matter in the end. If it is a different letter, we read it and we learn from it. If it is the same letter, we read it and we learn from it. But we're drilling down, so that's the sort of thing we do. Let's have a look at the next section. Make sure I've got the right one. No, I haven't. There we go. And I want to make it not white, but red. Okay, a few things to sort out there. So I repeat, he's already talked about himself being a fool before that, and this has been called the fool's speech, this section from chapters 10 to 13. Let no one take me as a fool, but If you do, then tolerate me just as you would a fool. There we go. So that I may do a little boasting. A little boasting. Since many are boasting in a way that the world does, I too will boast. So you can see there, he is continuing his idea of boasting. And the question, I suppose, is what do fools do? What do fools believe? That's a song. What do fools do? Fools boast, but notice that they boast in a worldly way. There is a different type of boasting. The boasting that Paul is going to do is boast in a worldly way because they're calling him a fool. And what do fools do? They boast in a worldly way. And he is about to go on and boast, but he's going to do something quite clever as he boasts. I want to say g'day to everybody. I can see a whole bunch of people watching. That's fantastic. And one concurrent viewer, it could be 2 or 3 people like Brenda and Merv are there, that sort of thing. So we've got at least 14, 15, 16, maybe 20 people. So hello, everybody. And someone's already liked it. Wow. I haven't even done anything yet. You've already liked it. You must be just being nice to me. Anyway, this boasting that Paul goes into doing, he's saying he is not talking as the Lord would, but as a fool. You gladly put up with fools since you are so wise. He's being really sarcastic here and ironic. The fools that they're putting up with are the super apostles. And those fools are fools because they boast. Already we've heard that they compare themselves with themselves. When was that? That was back there in chapter 10, I think. Chapter 10, verse 12. We dare not classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves when they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves. They are not wise. So they're not wise by doing that. The type of boasting that they're involved in is the sort of boasting that says, look how good I am. Interesting note. Let's just take a break for a second. John Dixon has written a book called Humilitas. And in that book, Humilitas, which I recommend anyone to get, I've lost my copy. So if you get one, get 2 and I'll buy it from you. I think I probably lent it to Travis or something. But anyway, hopefully Travis is not watching because I've just put him in it. But anyway, John Dixon talks about the first century and periods surrounding that, saying that humility was not a admired sort of way of speaking or way of being. Humility was seen as actually something quite low and worthless. It is interesting, however, that Jesus is the most humble, and Paul follows in that humility. We're going to see that in a moment. So we've got boasters who boast in their greatness and compare themselves with others. So these super apostles, earlier on in chapter 3, yes, they have letters of recommendation given by each other for each other. It's sort of like writing a reference, which I've done many times for people. And it's sort of saying, we think this person's great and they think we're great, that sort of thing. Paul is saying, well, that's just pretty foolish. Paul doesn't really care what you think of him, but he's going to boast, and he's saying that they should put up with him because they put up with other boasters. However, look at how he boasts. This will be an interesting thing. He goes on there to say, these fools that they're putting up with, he says, you even put up with anyone who enslaves you or exploits you. So let's just highlight those. Enslaves you, exploits you, takes advantage of you, or puts on airs or slaps you in the face. So it's interesting that this list is so specific that it was probably the case that each of those things was an experience that the Corinthians had experienced, an experience they experienced from these false teachers, these super apostles. So the one there, even to slap you in the face, that really does seem like it's referring to an event that everybody knows about. But it's the type of thing that people who dominate you by making themselves bigger and better than you begin to treat you as less than them. And this is classic type of thing: enslaving, exploiting, taking advantage, putting on airs. Now, putting on airs, excuse me, I just woofed my dinner down. Putting on airs is that idea of sort of floating in the air above you. So it's not really the way Paul wrote that, but it is a way of explaining the words that he used. It's someone who thinks they're up higher than you, that sort of thing. They're putting on airs. So it's interesting, Paul will then say, to my shame, he will say, we were too weak for that. And the question is, weak for what? Well, weak for slapping you in the face, putting on airs, enslaving you, exploiting you, and taking advantage. So they were too weak. It's like him saying, oh, to my shame, we were too weak to slap you in the face, were we? That sort of thing. There's so much irony in this. For whatever anyone else dares boast about, I'm speaking as a fool. I also dare boast about. So we've got this boasting theme happening here. Here we go. And here is a passage that we begin to get a lot of insight into who these super apostles were. So are they Hebrews? So they are Hebrews. So am I, he says. I'm a Hebrew as well. And we knew that he was a Hebrew of Hebrews. He was in Philippians 3. He was of the tribe of Benjamin. If you were to say I'm a Hebrew, you would be most honoured if you recognised that you were that Hebrew of Hebrews. Are they Israelites? So am I. My question here, as we look at this, is what is the difference between these two? It sounds like they're saying, are they Aussies? So am I. Are they Australians? So am I. The Hebrews were Israelites and Israelites were Hebrews. There might be some difference in terms of their language. Let me go and get something. I'll be back. You can have a look at this passage as I come back. I want to get something. Okay, I'm just the other side here. I'm coming back. I want to show you something. Right, back again. I found this book very helpful. Paul Barnett, second epistle to the Corinthians. Really, really good. It's sort of a thick book, but I think this has been gold in terms of my own preparation and thinking through the passage. And what he has is a description of pulling together what these super apostles were. So let me just see. Yes, the false apostles, their identity. So I'm just going to read you something from here. Who then were these false apostles? It is evident from 2 Corinthians that they were a group, that is many, probably men, who had come to Corinth, so they weren't locals. There was a few of them, and they were men, and they'd come from outside, and they had letters of recommendation, or commendation, from chapter 3, who had trespassed into Paul's field of ministry, where they and their message had been received. So we've got not locals, bunch of guys trampling on where Paul has already been. They're trampling on him. Are they Hebrews? We'll put this back up again so we can see that. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Israelites, so am I. Seed of Abraham, so am I. Ministers of Christ, notice that, don't miss that. Are they servants of Christ? You would think that he would say, no, they're not. But he says, look, I am more. So he doesn't say they're not servants of Christ, but he does say he is more a servant of Christ than them. We'll come back to that. Like Paul, these men are Hebrews and Israelites, physical descendants from the patriarchal fountainhead, Abraham. They are Jews. Now, where was the bit I was going to read about the Greek speaking? Here we go. Granted that it is possible they could have possessed the linguistic fluency sufficient for a ministry in Corinth. It is now understood that Palestine was Hellenized to such a degree that these Hebrews, Israelites, may well have been capable of displaying proficiency in the rhetorical arts of boasting and comparison that are mirrored by Paul's rebuttals within the letters. Paul will not concede inferiority to these men in the fundamentals of apostleship, but he does in language. So he says to them, no, I can't keep up with that. Steve Watt says, is Hebrew a term that links, let's put that up so we can see that. Social. I forgot to add my data source, so I'm just going to quickly do that while you're all talking amongst yourselves. Add data source, YouTube live chat, and that one, and add that there. And let's have a look at this one. Paching. There we go. Is Hebrew a term that links back to the Exodus from Egypt, while Israelite is a latter term? Yeah, well, possibly, I was a bit stumped by this one, and I'm just going to see, let's have a look at chapter 11. Chapter 11 and verse 22. Let's see if we can do this. Let's see what Paul Barnett says. Chapter 11 and verse 22. This was the bit I was looking for before. Yeah. Okay, so by identity, these men are Hebrews and Israelites, pure members of that race descended from its patriarchal fountainhead Abraham, whose seed they are. Of such persons, of people of Israel, he writes elsewhere, theirs is the adoption, that's Romans chapter 9. Let's have a look. The designation Hebrews, as contrasted with Hellenists in the Acts of the Apostles, is usually taken to imply people of Aramaic speech. Footnote, Hengel, okay? Does Paul present racial reference, Hebrews, also... Does Paul's present racial reference, Hebrews, also carry that linguistic import here, that is, they speak Greek? To the contrary, that these Hebrews Israelites have come to Corinth, a Greco-Roman metropolis, makes it almost certain that they were Greek-speaking, as Paul was, even though he, too, was of the people of Israel, a Hebrew. For them, a significant level of competence in the Greek language is implied. Paul will not concede inferiority to these men in the fundamentals of apostleship, but he does in speech. So these men are Jews, Greek-speaking Jews, who have come bearing letters of commendation. Let's see if he says anything else. Now, I don't know. That was good. I mean, I just told you this guy's pretty good. I think what Paul Barnett is saying is that... I think what Paul Barnett is saying is that the Hebrews is that picture of, that's not right, Hellenized Greek speaking. I'm going to have to come back to you on this. I'm going to have to come back to you on this and have a look and have a think about that. So why did you go away? There you are. Not sure, just speculating. Well, that's all right. We can do that here and we can think through that. I'm going to have to think through that one as well. But let us jump back into the text and jump back here. Let's see. I am more, he says. So at least we know. I think the thing that sticks out for me is that they are at least calling themselves servants of Christ, whatever that's going to mean. I think what they are saying is they're servants of Christ in that they are preaching about Jesus Christ or preaching about the coming Christ. It's a little bit uncertain. Just because we've only got half the conversation, it's difficult for us to pick that out. I'll have another look back on what Paul Barnett has to say. But here Paul starts to boast. He has worked harder. He has been in prison more frequently, flogged more severely, been exposed to death again and again. He was beaten with rods. He was pelted with stones. 3 times he was shipwrecked. He spent a day and a night in the open sea. 5 times received the 40 lashes minus 1. Constantly on the move, in danger, in danger, in danger, in danger, in danger, in danger, in danger. In danger from false believers. I've laboured and toiled, often gone without sleep. You know what that's like. I've known hunger and thirst. I've never known what's that like. It's not a first order issue, is it? It's not. Brenda, that's right. The New Bible Dictionary. Let's see what Steve has to say here. New Bible Dictionary suggests that Hebrew might be a racial term, while Israelite might be a national political description. Yeah, good. New Bible Dictionary is pretty good. It's definitely not. That's right. I think, Brenda, even though it's not a first order issue, it's an issue, and we want to explore it and find out the nuances in why Paul seems to be saying it like this, and so we appreciate more what he's going on about. He's often gone without food. He's been cold and naked, and besides everything else, now I used to think this. I face the daily pressure of my concern for all the churches. So what he does in this list is finishes with this point about the daily pressure of concern for all the churches. And the suggestion is that because he leaves it to the last in this list, that means that this pressure is the biggest out of all of those things. So going without food and naked and in danger from all of those things, they are all bad, but they are less a suffering than his daily pressure for all concern for all the churches. And who was his greatest concern? Who was the church that was giving him the most problems? Well, it was Corinth. And the funny thing is, funny is not the right word, but anyway, the funny thing is that Corinth was giving him the most grief, literally, and yet Corinth has taught us the most about being church. Isn't that, see how God uses weakness and turns it into strong, takes evil and turns it into good. Here is a church that was going backwards, upside down, wrong way around, really bad, and yet it might be the church that tells us the most about how to be good church. That's sort of like God to do that, isn't it? What do you think this means? Who is weak, and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin, and I do not inwardly burn? I am uncertain what he's talking about there, and if you have any comments about what you think he might be saying, then I'd be happy for you to put that down in the live chat to help me out here. This inwardly burning might be a reference to a sexual desire, that sort of thing. He's sort of saying, I'm no different. And the reason it might be that is because in Corinth, one of the key problems that Paul had there was with sexual immorality amongst the church members, because the culture was so immersed in sexual immorality. It was normal for temple prostitution, homosexuality, all of those sorts of things to be practiced. And he will say that's what some of you were, but you were washed, you were sanctified, that sort of thing. And it seems that some have slipped back into that lifestyle. A little bit different for us. Is it a reference? Is it a reference? Who is led into sin? I'm not sure what you mean there, Steve. Might have to unpack that a little bit. So sexual immorality in Corinth. It's a little bit different to us because traditionally in Australia we have a very Christian conservative view of marriage, and although that is changing in recent times, and so we are a little different to Corinth. We need to understand that Corinth was immersed in a world that was pretty much saying this type of sexual immorality that they were involved in was not actually immorality. It's only immorality when you bring God's standards into it. For them, it was just normal life. It's just what happened. It's just how it went. Paul, however, would say that it's that this type of behaviour is immorality. Now, Steve has said something here. Is it a follow-on from his previous comment about daily concern, the normal concerns of a pastor for his flock? His flock hen, his flock, they're struggling. Yeah, I think it must follow on. Who is weak and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin and I do not inwardly burn? Yeah, that's good. That's helpful. This next bit is what I wanted to really get onto. The God and Father of our Lord Jesus, who is to be praised forever, knows I'm not lying. If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. And here is what he's doing. Boast again, showing weakness. So what Paul is doing, he is doing what the fool does, but he does it in a way that no one expects, and he boasts about his weaknesses. And this is really important because his ministry it looks like Jesus. His ministry is mirroring the suffering of the Christ. And so for them to say his ministry is weak because there is suffering, they would then have to say Jesus' ministry was weak because there was suffering. So you can see what he's doing there. So we'll move on from there. Now, but then he goes back to one here, and he talks about this story about being in Damascus. In Damascus, and this is the of this whole list of sufferings that he's gone through, he will finish the list not with the daily pressure of looking after the church, but he finishes with this one. Being lowered in a basket from a window down a wall and slipped through his hands. So what is it about this suffering, being lowered in a basket, that could at all be over or more than all the previous sufferings? Why is being... So I was trying to say it like this. I don't think he's just randomly thinking of the things. He's not just randomly thinking back, thinking, oh yeah, that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. He's actually ordering them quite purposefully and intentionally. He's put there at the end of the first list the daily pressure of concern for the churches, which his concern would have been for Corinth particularly, wouldn't it? Here's a father grieving about his wayward child. I mean, even can you begin to imagine that? And I imagine some of you can. But then he adds this one about being lowered in a basket from a window. I mean, I probably would have put that one first if I was referencing them. So shame, dishonour, running away like weak coward, being a chicken. Ah, yes, he feels like that. He feels like this one Steve is mentioning here. Is it going to come up for me? Steve's just mentioning who is weak, and I do not feel weak. I suppose there it is. Paul would have, I wonder, yeah, that's a good point. Paul could have been tempted to try to escape, try to get out of it, try to leave the Corinthians to their own devices, that sort of thing, give up on them, that sort of thing, but that would have been weakness. I do still think that the inwardly burn reference does have some sort of sexual reference there, because he is saying he's just like them. He's asking them, calling on them to live for Christ and give up on that stuff. And he's saying, I've got to wrestle with that as well. I'm not somehow what's the word? It's late, isn't it? Immune. He's not immune from that. Back to the basket. Why the basket? Possibly, Steve is answering that question. Fleeing from Damascus makes him look like a coward. It shows his weakness. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Well, let's look at it in Acts and see what's going on. Acts chapter 9. Now, here is what happens. Chapter 9 is the story of Paul's conversion. Where is he on the way to? He's on the way to Damascus. Now, maybe I should look at it on here, actually. Let's do that. I'm going to have a look on here so we can all look at it together. Is this going to let me do it? And let's go to Acts chapter 9. Done. Okay. Can I make that any bigger? No, I can't. All right. Can I point at it? Yes, I can. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found Damascus, see that, Damascus? So that he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners. As he neared where? Damascus, on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Oh, there's Karen Dean. A message in the middle of that. You could send me a text message and it's going to turn up on there. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now get up, go into the city of Damascus, and you'll be told what to do. The men travelling with Saul, he was blind. In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias who called to him in a vision. Ananias, yes, Lord, he answered. Then tells Ananias to go. And then Ananias says, I'm not really keen about that. But the Lord says, go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. Now notice what's going on here. He's in Damascus. He's heading for Damascus, proud, ready to kill, ready to persecute. He is confronted by Jesus. He's blinded. He then meets Ananias. Ananias is worried. Ananias then hears from the Lord that this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. Now, notice Paul in particular is called to suffer for Jesus' name, and he is in Damascus, and he is the chosen instrument of Jesus for this. Then Ananias went to the house. He entered, placing his hands on Saul, received the Spirit. Scales fell off his eyes. Taking some food, he regained his strength. Paul spent several days with the disciples where? In Damascus. And at once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. What a turnaround, hey? What a turnaround. He goes from murderer and persecutor to proclaimer. Now, keep going. Look at the story. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, isn't the man who caused havoc in Jerusalem, etc.? Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. After many days, what happened? There was a conspiracy by the Jews to kill him, but Saul learned of their plan, and a day and night they kept close watch on the city gates in order to kill him. But his followers took him by night and lowered him in a basket through an opening in the wall. Let's see what. We'll go back to here and we'll have a look. Yes, so let's have a look. Steve says, so double shame then. Not only did he have to flee, but he also forever feels the shame for having persecuted the Church of Jesus, which is why he was there in the first place. Yeah, I do think this is why this part, this whole bit about the lowered in a basket and slipped through his hands in Damascus, I think is seen as the overarching suffering that all the other sufferings fall under, because this is the point where he was coming into Damascus as a zealous persecutor, but he went out of Damascus a completely turned around person, as a fleeing down out the window sort of thing. Damascus was the turning point, the major turning point in Paul's life. It was the moment when that would be followed by suffering. It was the moment that everything that followed would be suffering. So that's what I think this is going on about, and why that is there in that particular position. He says, though, here, I must go on boasting, although there is nothing to be gained. I will go on to visions and revelations from the Lord. It seems that the super apostles had some sort of claim of visions and revelations, and Paul is now going to say this. Imagine I know a man, which sounds like he's not talking about himself, but later we find here, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me. He talks about knowing a man, and the power of it is quite clever. I know a man who, for 14 years ago, was caught up into the third heaven. Wow! They would have said, Paul, why didn't you tell us about that guy? That sounds awesome. And we know that, don't we? Someone writes a book saying, I went to heaven. Everybody wants to read the book. The book's an immediate seller. We've had a couple of those with kids that have gone to heaven. At least one of those has been seen to be a fraud because the dad thought, I can make some money out of this, and told his kid what to say. Didn't happen at all. Not to mention that every time someone goes to heaven in those books, the heaven that they go to is a lot like the heaven of pictures and stuff that is not from the Bible. Anyway, that's something to take into consideration. He says, I know a man who was caught up to the third heaven. Now, the third heaven means the highest heaven. holy, holy, holy. The third holy is the holiest. Holy, holier, holiest. Heaven, heavener, heavenest. That sort of thing. The third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. I don't know if what this experience was, because he doesn't talk about it in any other place. And we might see why in a moment. It could have been, I don't know. It doesn't really talk about it, and we'll see that in a minute. I was going to speculate for a moment, but decided not to. God knows. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things that no one is permitted to tell. Now that's intriguing, isn't it? Just to take a tangent here in my last 3 minutes, I was reading that Paul's understanding of the rapture, because people couldn't find it anywhere else, said, well, God must have told him about the rapture in this third heaven visit. The problem is he's not allowed to tell anybody what happened in that third heaven visit and what was said. So that it was something about the rapture is probably not right, and the rapture's probably not really accurate either. Always happy to talk about that. I'm still really wrestling, so you can wrestle with me, suffering. I will boast about a man like that, but I will not boast about myself except about my weakness. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain so no one will think more of me than is warranted, or what I do or say. So he's actually saying he begins to say, I know a guy that this happened to, and then he says, if that was me, I could speak and it would be the truth, that boasting, but it wouldn't be any good because it would draw attention to me. And it goes then, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. So this thorn, there is so much talk about what this thorn might be. Some have said that the thorn is the super apostles. Some have said that the thorn is an eyesight problem that Paul had. It seems that he did have that. If you look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 10, Paul would have normally had a person he would have dictated and had a person write out the words for him, the letters for him. But in Galatians 6 verse 10 he says, see what large letters I write when I write to you with my own hand. There's that sense that maybe he had some eye problem. Well, possibly. He's prayed 3 times, pleaded with the Lord to take it away, but it says very significantly, my grace is sufficient for you, my power is made perfect in weakness. Now, we can say there, the application for us is when things are hard for us, that's when we're going to recognize God the most and the best. And that's true. That's true. But I don't think that's what this passage is saying. This passage is not about you and me. This passage is about Paul. And when Jesus says to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, my power is made perfect in weakness, it's something that we're to understand about Paul, and the Corinthians are to understand about Paul as Jesus' suffering servant. I know that's a reference to Jesus, but it's also a description of Paul. So Paul says, I'll boast, therefore, more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardship, in persecution, in difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong. I've made a fool of myself. Again, coming back to the fool idea. But you drove me to it. Can you say you want to listen to fools? Then he's going to talk to you like a fool. He's going to boast, but he's going to boast about weaknesses. And so show his ministry and himself to be like Christ. So he's really tricking them in a way. Not tricking them badly, but making them think twice. I ought to have been commended by you, for I'm not in the least inferior to those super apostles. Or listen to this. For I'm not the least inferior. He's not the least inferior to those super apostles, even though I am nothing. So he is saying he is nothing. And if he is not in the least inferior to those super apostles, he is saying they are less than nothing. He's putting himself down, but by putting himself down, he's putting everybody else, these super apostles, even less down from him. I persevered in demonstrating among you the marks of a true apostle, including signs, wonders, and miracles. So Paul was doing signs, wonders, and miracles, and this is a mark of the apostle. So you find in the New Testament, most, if not all, of the miraculous things that go on are done by the apostles. And Acts will actually say many miraculous signs and wonders were done by the apostles. And these miraculous signs and wonders were authenticators of Jesus' ministry and remain authenticators of the apostles' ministry. So if I do a sign or a wonder, it's not an authenticating of me being an apostle or something like that. It just happens to be the grace of God has come at that point and done that. But I don't think I've ever done a miracle. I don't remember doing it anyway. I think that's something I would have remembered. Paul, however, says this is the mark. How were you inferior to the other churches, except that I was never a burden to you? Remember, burden means I didn't take your money. Forgive me this wrong, and probably should have had inverted commas there. It was wrong for me to do something for you for free, to give something for you for free. Well, there we go. Well, next week we're looking at the next section of 2 Corinthians, and the next section is the last section, and I am looking forward to preaching it on Sunday, and hopefully you'll be able to pray, because I've got Synod and all sorts of things happening this week, so I'm going to be right up until early hours of Sunday morning trying to pull this together, so I really appreciate your prayer. Well, that's it for another night of the drill down. Thank you for being here. It's good to be with you. I love it that there's heaps and heaps of live chat. If you can, when you go off this live stream, jump back onto it in about a minute or so after it's finished. Then like it, subscribe, put a comment in the bottom there. That really helps things to get out and get known. It makes sure things come up on people's screens so that they know what's happening. Is that all cool? Good to be with you, and I'll see you later.